Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to do another passage reading. This one from the book of First Timothy. So this one is a letter. It was written to Timothy by Paul, and it was kind of like a almost like a kind of like like not a qualification, but more of like a letter written to him because Timothy was a young church leader who was starting churches and opening like building churches. So this was a lot of just kind of talking him through how to do this and giving different warnings, different qualifications. And what we're going to talk about today is what is the beginning of chapter 3. So that's verses 1 through 7 here. And we're going to talk a little bit about the qualifications of overseers, which this is often used as qualifications of the pastor or bishop, depending on denomination, depending on interpretation of the actual Greek. Um, anyways, I'm going to read from the ESV. That's just my preferred one. It's going to be up on the screen. I've just got to like cut that in. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Um, the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober minded, self controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So, what this gives a lot of requirements for this position. It's a very difficult position. It's a very high up there one. It needs all of these qualifications to make sure that the person there should actually be there. And some important qualifications that I really want to touch on in this one, aside from like the obvious ones, it flat out says husband of one wife. A pastor should be a man who is married, who has kids. It says they should also have submissive, like, well, not necessarily submissive in the same sense that we see it nowadays, but more of kids that obey their parents. They should have well acting kids. Up until, they're outside of the house. It says manages own a household. So obviously when the kids are out and grown, if they've become atheists or they've just left the church or they're just wild children after they've left the home, at that point, they're not a part of the household. The same in the sense of the qualification. But some things that I thought were really important to really just kind of touch on for a minute is you look at like certain points of like must be well thought of by outsiders. And what I think that a lot of people just kind of gloss over is when you see these big old prosperity preachers or these preachers going around to other areas and they're committing horrible acts of abuse or they're preaching false teachings and they're not well thought of by outsiders of the church, they should be disqualified from this. They should not be pastors, but they're still acting in those positions because they don't have an accountability structure that helps keep them where they need to be. And we'll talk a little bit more about deacons and elders, and those should be the accountability, and there's requirements for those positions as well. But obviously, a lot of these requirements, when you look at them, you have able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household. It's the pastor is in a position where they're not just a teacher for the church on Sundays. They are also supposed to be setting an example for the entirety of their congregation. So these points, obviously, a pastor should not be having these problems because they should be setting a good example. You have husband of one wife. They shouldn't have been remarried multiple times because the biblical picture of marriage is one time, no divorce, one time, husband and wife. That is the biblical picture of marriage that we are given from Genesis all the way to Revelation. So a pastor should meet that standard because they're setting an example for the church. But aside from that, I know this is probably nowadays a hot topic issue, and it's probably a controversial one to a lot of people. But honestly, when you look at Timothy, it shouldn't be that hard to understand. Even looking at the Greek, it should not be hard to understand. But if we're getting a little bit past the point of just brief teaching, so I'm gonna pause it here. I do want to emphasize stuff like that. I do not call myself a pastor. I am not a pastor. I do not meet a lot of these qualifications. I am recently married, don't have kids. That alone automatically makes me not qualified to be a pastor yet. And so I just want to make sure that that is very clear. I'm not pointing myself up into that category. I don't think I am. I do not have the qualifications, but yeah. So, anyways, that's where we're going to end this video for today. I hope everyone has a great day and God bless.